Hello everybody, this is Deuster with Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. I have another story I want to share with you. I put this story together several years ago, and it was, like I said, ran in several historical publications as well as the local newspapers, and I called it Death at High Noon. The morning of June 12th, 1876 arrived with a breathtaking sunrise. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed, issuing his wake-up call to the residents of the quiet little community of Owens Chapel. A red-tailed hawk let out a scream as he slowly circled above the treetops. Polk Owen leaned against the porch post, sipping on his second cup of coffee and admiring the dawn sky. In his 31 years, it was one of the most beautiful sunrises he had ever witnessed. The eastern sky was ablaze with a rosy red glow, as if the sky itself were on fire. Birds sang from the treetops as they welcomed in the new morning. The temperature was already above 80 degrees, and it promised to be another hot summer day. There was not a cloud in the sky. As the sun peaked above the distant horizon, Polk turned his attention to the shore at hand. To his right lay the wheat field, golden brown and ready for the harvest, the ripe golden heads moving in unison as waves upon a golden sea in the soft morning breeze. Yes, sir, it's going to be a fine day, he thought to himself, as he stepped off the porch and took in a deep breath of morning air. He whistled softly as he hurriedly crossed the yard and entered the coolness of the barn. Soon the others would be there, and he wanted to be ready when they arrived. Lifting the heavy wheat cradle, he ran his thumb along the edge of the blade, and not satisfied with what he found, applied the whetstone until the edge was razor sharp. The cradle was the forerunner of the modern-day reaper. A long wooden handle was attached to a steel blade, and extending in front of the blade were long, curved wooden fingers. As the cradle was swung through the grain, the stalks were cut by the blade, cradled by the fingers, and then piled on the ground. The bundles were then tied into shocks and left standing in the field, where they would be threshed, removing the grain. Use of the cradle required a strong physique. Shortly, Jesse and Jim Owen arrived, and the three brothers laughed and joked while they waited for the rest. A few minutes later, Sam Mowdy, Pierce Pitt, Jim and John Murphy, Bill Crockett, Henry Davidson, Arch Randolph, and Ike Doss, a young black man, appeared on the scene. The troop of 11 men picked at each other as they joked as they made their way to the waiting wheat. By midday, the hot rays of the sun beat down unmercifully upon the bare backs of the workers as they reaped the golden wheat. With the muscular Owen boys yielding the cradles, it didn't take long before they were well out in front of the bundlers and the tires. Not wanting to get too much wheat on the ground, they decided to help the others catch up before stopping for dinner. As the last bundles was placed in the shock, the workers were aware of a sudden change in the weather, as the heat gave way to cooler air. Looking to the northeast, they were alarmed to see a storm clouds gathering, and almost immediately the sun was hidden behind dark, billowing clouds. Knowing the rain would soon be falling, the workers quickly gathered their tools and headed off across the wheat stubble to the safety of the barn. Halfway across the field, large drops of cold rain began falling from a dark sky, and 9 of the workers sought safety under the spreading limbs of a large oak tree. Pierce Pitt and Bill Crockett had already passed this point, and instead of turning back, continued running toward the barn. Several animals, namely a horse, a couple of cows, and a pig, also sought safety under the spreading limbs of a big oak tree in a futile attempt to escape the torrential rain. The rain lasted only a few minutes, but the deep rolling thunder continued to echo up and down the Santee Valley. As the workers squatted underneath the protective branches of the tree, a swarm of black, low-hanging clouds came rushing at them. The dark, ominous clouds seemed so low that any one of the workers could have reached up and touched one. The air was charged with static, and they felt their hair stand on end as they watched the evil, foreboding storm from beneath their refuge. Suddenly, the clouds seemed to be ripped apart as an enormous lightning bolt blasted into the huge tree. The force of the blast was phenomenal, splitting the massive trunk into 4 sections and literally tearing the stump from the ground. The air was immediately filled with tree bark, splinters, dirt, and rocks, and gave the immediate impression that the whole world had literally exploded. A close neighbor of the Owens, Thomas Savage, had been working in a nearby field and taken refuge underneath a small tree along the fence row when the sudden storm hit. It was from this vantage point where he witnessed the horrible tragedy of nature. He quickly ran over to assist and was sickened by the terrible sight. Witnessing an explosion from the barn, Pitt and Crockett ran to what was left of the tree. Stunned and half blinded, the survivors looked upon the traumatic scene. Their friends and co-workers lay scattered on the wet ground, unable to speak or move, with the exception of Jim Owen, who had been hurled 20 feet away by the blast. He slowly got to his feet and joined Pitt and Crockett as they attempted to help their comrades. Only 2 needed attention, Sam Mowdy and Jim Murphy. The other 6 lay dead. Killed in the storm were Polk and Jesse Owen, their nephew Henry Davidson, John C. Murphy, Arch Randolph, and Ike Doss. The farm animals were so stunned that it was almost dark before they fully recovered. Meanwhile, the storm continued its damage further north, and as a result of the heavy rains, the usually tranquil Santee Creek quickly overflowed its banks. Never before had the residents along this small stream seen the water rise so quickly. It was several hours before a horse and rider could ford the creek at Baggett's store, and in an attempt to carry the dreadful news of the accident to relatives living across the rain-swollen stream. Excuse me. The following day, 31-year-old Polk Owen, 27-year-old Jesse Owen, 15-year-old Henry Davidson, and 33-year-old John C. Murphy were laid to rest in Owens Chapel Cemetery. 20-year-old Archer Couts Randolph was buried in the family's plot in nearby Hopewell Church Cemetery. Ike Doss was probably buried somewhere in the Owens Chapel community, and most likely in an unmarked grave. Sam Mowdy lived to raise a family, though he never fully recovered from the accident. He died in 1890 at the young age of 38. He was buried in the Wydick Dozier Cemetery just north of Springfield. Bill Crockett also lived to raise a family, and following that eventful day, he had a deathly fear of thunderstorms. He died in 1906 and was also buried in the Owens Chapel Cemetery, just a few feet from his friends who lost their lives on that tragic day of June 12th, 1876. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the little story. It is true. I have visited graves in the cemetery several times. Said I hope you enjoyed the story. Like my channel and subscribe to it if you don't mind. And I thank you for your time. And I'll catch you next time.